to screw around with like trying to tie my hair back or, have it, having to screw with it at all. I just stick it up under a hat and I'm done.
Right. Yeah. I should probably comb my hair or something, but I can't be bothered with it. I mean,
probably more testosterone than I have,
Well,
it's my own fault.
So yes, I already started recording it. So let's say I'll just introduce you. I mean, you're obviously very famous, very infamous, very infamous,
famous.
Yeah. So it's the Semiogogue, and in his videos he mentions many times that a few times that he's been to Turkey and spent some time there, and it's a place that's always fascinated me. As in, I don't really understand it, although I get an idea that it's like a mix of very ancient things, kind of. So I thought I'd ask him if he could explain a bit Turkey. What is it? And, that's it.
Good gracious. I can try. Obviously, I mean, your mileage may vary in the sense that I'm not Turkish. My only qualifications for being able to talk about it are that I have had a number of friends and have a number of friends who are Turkish. And I lived in Turkey on 2 separate occasions for a total of 6 years.
Really? So that's quite long, though. So it's better in a way. I mean, I could ask a Turkish person, but in a way, this is better because you have my naive view of it, and I can ask you what your impression was as a Westerner.
Yeah.
Maybe,
oh, absolutely.
Maybe it might help in that regard. But so why were you there twice, or it was work or something? Was it?
I had a friend when I was coming up in high school. I made friends with a Turkish guy, and he was sort of my best friend in high school. And then he ended up moving back there in the early 90s, mid 90s, somewhere right in there. No, early 90s. And I went off to do a college age sort of trip to Europe. And while I was there, I mean, there was another. It's all a mess and a long story, but that same high school friend had another friend come to visit the United States when when I was still young and before my friend moved back or whatever. So I had met some of his friends who had come to the U.S. So I actually had 2 Turkish friends at that point, even though I'd never been there. Okay. And when I went to Europe for Christmas for that, or not Christmas, for the summer, I ended up just sort of getting burned out on seeing just lines. At the time, what was very common was lines of backpacking college students, and they just sort of wound from one spot in Italy to a ferry that would take them over to Greece, and then a ferry that would take them to the Greek islands. And you just see these long lines of people with backpacks and doing the grand tour. And so I decided to split off from that, and I just caught a train to Istanbul from Greece. And arrived there, called my friends, and the rest was sort of history. I spent about a month there at the end of that summer, becoming accustomed to the place and seeing what was what. It was certainly the furthest I had ever been from home at that point.
The furthest east, yeah. So you must have been known even less about it then than I know now. So you must have been truly the naive, impressionable wanderer.
Yes,
it must have been just overwhelmingly strange. I know from moving here to Ireland from Canada that how odd it can be, just subtly, the little cultural differences you don't expect, and that's in something in a culture that's much closer and more similar. So I know a little bit that the experience, how shocking it can be, the difference. But do go on.
And have you? How long have you lived in? If you don't mind me asking, how long have you lived in Ireland?
I've been here like 10 years now, but I still get shocked every now and again. I'll still be like, what?
Right. So the main thing is you've been there long enough to get that full immersion where you're like, this is a different world.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the main part, is to be away for long enough. And as you say, it's
6 years you were there, so that was quite the immersion too.
But in two runs.
Okay.
So the first time was 2.5. The second time was 3.5 years. I came back for a bit after the first time, but I was there for that summer for a good while, and I came back to the U.S. and I said to hell with this. I can go to this, Constantinople, Istanbul. I can go to this, bridge between East and West, the city of Constantine, and be far, far away. And, this is very much a Gen X 90s vibe, right? Like
Okay.
at that point, the countries were opening up that had not really been accessible before. So, I had a few friends who had moved to the Czech Republic and done their thing there, hung out, made the Czechs hate them, for being, expats and Eurotrash and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of people were moving around at that time. It was very much, Mondo 2000 global village. I mean, a little before that, but But yeah, so I came back to the U.S. and I said, to hell with this, I'm going back there. This is cool. So I saved up some money and headed over for the first time living there. That would have been like, 96, 98-ish. And I got exposed to the country. Yeah.
So yeah, I know you can't. I know to try and describe a country is, which is what I'm asking you. But I suppose so. What's the best thing? What's the best way to approach it? Say what was the most shocking things that you weren't accustomed to? Let's say
at the time. Yeah, sure. That's a place to start. For me, what stood out at the time, I mean, we can kind of take two tracks with this. I can give you some, if this suits you, I can give you sort of anecdotes and impressions as we're doing at the moment, and maybe I can weave in a little bit of background on it.
Yeah, sure.
Like because you had originally asked me, I think what's the country is about or its history or where it came from. The thing that stood out for me the most at the time I got there, because I was a young man, I was in my early 20s, and it struck me that there wasn't the constant quipping and gouging of young men who are, when you're in a group of male friends at that age in my early 20s, I remember that you'd always be making fun of each other or waiting for someone to say the wrong thing or coming in with some sort of like snide remark on the side, establishing your little dominance hierarchy as your male group. And I did not see that there then. That was something that really stood out at the time. If you go over to your friend's house, there was always quite a bit of fuss that was made and display that was considered necessary about how you cared for your friends and that they were like your family and you'd always be there for them. And that really struck me. The first time I sat down in a group of friends and I noticed that everybody wasn't making fun of each other or repeating phrases from television. Right. That sort of normative business of what everybody had heard in the latest sitcom that they then began to cackle about. Now, I'm not saying that Turkey was perfect. There are ways in which, some of that emerged as hypocritical, some of it. But that was really a striking thing straight out of the gate. So that kind of gives me an angle to talk about background on it. The country, obviously Anatolia, Asia Minor, that's you used to have things like Phrygians and Byzantines and Lycians and Carians and the pirates from that area, and Pisidian slingers and Cappadocians and red-headed Gauls in the center of the country.
I've heard of some of those.
Yeah, so it's a lot of people think of it as the beginning of the East, and that's certainly true. But this is kind of hackneyed to talk about it being a bridge between East and West. But it's also
it is kind of though.
Yeah, it is, and it's the end of the West. And so lots of history with Persians and Ionian Greeks and Byzantines, Romans and Byzantines. And then, the Turks come in. First, you get a wave of Seljuk Turks, and I guess that's probably in the 13th century, although, don't quote me on that. Right. And then the Byzantines deal with them, maintain much of their territory, but then the Ottomans come in. I mean, you have a little bit of a crisis there with Tamerlane mixed in as well. But the Ottomans come in, I guess, in probably the early 14th century. They begin to push the borders on the Byzantines, and by 1453, Ikinci Mehmet, the conqueror, the second Mehmet, has come in and taken Constantinople, and so they took all that territory, and they immediately began to adopt Western customs. but they maintained any number of their own.
Okay.
And so you ended up sort of almost out of the gate with this blending of East and West. And
Right.
and that, I think, shaped that framework that I encountered when I first got there, where you have this focus on family. There are any number of ritual greetings that come out of Islam and out of Turkish culture.
Mm-hmm.
That was another thing that really stood out to me, is all the different ways there was formulaic speech. So if you're well disposed towards your environment and you happen to be walking into the office or down a street that you daily commute along, and you pass a workman, you're supposed to say "kolay gelsin," which means "may your work come easily for you." Right? There's a ritual statement for almost everything. So
but that's kind of like here as well. You do have that in the remnant, and something I noticed compared to Canada. Well, that ritualistic sayings for commonplace things that are like deep rooted and more that's just older traditional society as well, because I've noticed that here, and I was in Japan for a while too, and it was like that as well. There was that formalism of speech and things that you can encounter and do, and different types of people. There's a saying that a certain thing you should perform, let's say. So that's like older societies. Europe as well, I would say, are like that.
Yeah, once upon a time, there was more of it. There was probably quite a bit more of it in the U.S., though, of course, being more heterogeneous, with much more mixed populations in the New World. Maybe not as much, but it struck me like if someone just got a great gift, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to come see my new car? I got a new car," and you like go outside, and you're like, "Man, congratulations! It looks great, man. I hope you enjoy it," or whatever. Yeah. In Turkish, they'll say, "May your eyes shine." So
nice.
Now, of course,
Sounds
that sounds different. Maybe it doesn't sound as formal or ritualistic, when you're immersed in that culture and not looking at it from the outside. But it did strike me that there are a number of very specific phrases. There's more a locked phrase that you have for a given thing. Yeah. And some of that comes out of religious stuff. So you're walking down the street and you see a child that's cute or something, and you're like, "Oh man, you're talking to your neighbor, and your beautiful son, and you pass by, or they'll say mashallah, which means may God protect me, because it's like calling down the evil eye by saying something nice about the child. So yeah,
right. Like, so they're similar to the Greeks in that sense.
Yeah. I'm going to get myself in trouble with Greek relatives, but they're
I know. Even in Greek people that follow me, just the fact that we're not berating and like putting them down the whole time, they'll be like upset.
Yeah,
well, let's just be, we're not obviously, we can't get involved into that.
I've gotten involved in it a bit, but yeah, I've got argued both with Greeks and with Turks on that. To me, they do undoubtedly share any number of features. So they
do. So let's just say we're here to be absolutely impartial to that. We're just here to talk about Turkey and explain it to people from as much as we can from your perspective. And
sure. All right. Well, I won't jump into the fray, but I will note that there are major cultural differences, and of course, any number of things that are shared in the culture. So, the Greeks will call it Greek coffee, the Turks will call it Turkish coffee. I challenge you to tell the difference with a blindfold on. Turks love meat on a skewer. So do the Greeks, but the Greeks, like souvlaki with pork, whereas obviously the Turks as Muslims don't eat it. Both of them play backgammon furiously, and they love to bet on it. But the one group calls it tavla, where the other one calls it tavli.
Right.
And you see that as far abroad as like Georgia or the Levantine coast.
Let me just ask you quick there. Did you, in your encountering with Turks, was there a lot of them that would like to play up that similarity with Greece, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, leftists in Turkey generally like to look for aspects of Europe that are similar to them.
Right. Okay.
My friends used to call them, white collar Turks.
Okay.
But the more nationalist Turks, there are two kind of directions that goes. One direction is towards pan-Turkism or Turanism, which is the idea that the Turks have relatives and connections all through Central Asia, and they look back to history kind of like right wingers in the West. So instead of some will look more towards Islam, just like you'll have some right wing Christians, but others will be like, our ancestors, came out of the East, and we're archers and wrestlers, and we're originally pagans, and like the MHP, which is the Turkish nationalist right wing, or one facet of it. They call themselves the Grey Wolves, and they make a little hand gesture that's supposed to look like a wolf, because it was said that Turkish tribes followed a wolf out of their homelands.
So they would be openly paganish, counter to Islam kind of thing, or no?
Well, I wouldn't say counter to Islam,
right? But along with or something.
Well, yeah, I think it's just how observant you happen to be. And I can't speak with any kind of expertise on this because I didn't have a bunch of MHP friends when I was there. At MHP, it's just MHP. And it stands for, whatever the words are that designate that gang.
Okay. And what are they? They're
the Grey Wolves or whatever. They're the Turkish nationalists. Right. So I didn't have a bunch of, close interaction with any of them. I'm sure I passed some when I went to my friend's kickboxing studio, or you'd see them outside practicing kickboxing around a barrel where they're burning things, where they're attending a parking lot at night or something in Cihangir once upon a time. But, and that doesn't mean all of them are working in parking lots. I'm not saying anything like that. How do I get back around to this? You have different.
You can see that here too. You can see, gangs of roughs, people having bonfires and burning cars and doing things more savage things than you would expect.
Yeah.
Let's just say than you would see in Canada. Let's say.
Well, just Canada, certainly. Yeah. I've never been to a more just frustratingly polite place in my life. It just.
Well, yeah. It's too much, really. Yeah.
Well, they're just really, really civilized and polite, almost to the point of self-abnegation. But some of the most beautiful country in the New World.
Yeah, it is. It was unique, and it was it's saying my little corner of it was very unique, but it was very much like it was very close to the American border in Washington, British Columbia. So there was all these during the Vietnam War, all these draft dodgers moved up there. So and they were all growing weed in the hills and all this kind of thing. And there was crazy stories of them. Like they would actually, some of them would chain bears to guard their fields of weed and stuff like that, and have these crazy underground tunnels that went. There was a shack at one point on the Canadian side, and another one corresponding on the American side, and a tunnel underground for just selling weed in America. So it was part crazy hippie and part redneck, to an extreme, which is probably what I am, I guess.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of that coming out of there. I had a friend who came out of Medford, Oregon, and it was kind of, like you said, it's kind of half good old boy and half hippie commune.
Yeah, so it wasn't like the super polite types. I mean, they were, I guess. It's hard to explain what it is. Well, we shouldn't get into it because I'd get confused and carry on for about an hour about it. And, who knows? I mean, fucking Canadians. They're too PC overall. They're extremely PC. But they're they've countered their entire culture based on proving they're not Americans all the time. Even that, even when you were saying when you said immediately you were confused that they weren't doing the competitive ribbing each other and talking about TV shows. Because that's the same. It's the same even here. That also was something I noticed, and it was okay, so that's totally different. That's, it's just Canadians, Americans. It's the similarity. I won't say it's the same as Greeks and Turks, but they're groups.
No, we haven't
very similar, and they hate each other. It's whatever.
Right. I did notice Canadians. That it was actually that first trip of mine to Europe in 93-ish or 92-ish, whenever it was, that I was like, why are all these people? There's only one group of people with flags on their backpacks, and it's Canadians, and they're all it's so that nobody thinks we're American.
Yeah, and it's just stupid. And really, they're hated all the more for it and for other reasons.
Well, it's all right. I mean, I have no problem with Canadians. They've always been cool people to me. And I haven't seen any in the rural areas. I've only been to Toronto and Vancouver, and only briefly. So I just got to see, city dwelling hipsters. So there's an entire world over there that I have no exposure to. So,
I mean, I don't want to talk. I mean, there's great things about them, especially it's like where I grew up. I do not regret it. I think it was great, but that whole proving we're not American all the time kind of thing does get annoying, and people notice that it's annoying.
Yeah, probably for Americans too. But yeah, no aspersions towards Canadians. I don't even know enough about Canadians to be throwing shade anyway. But
same as Americans, but they hate them.
but more resistance to cold. Yeah, that's
yeah, exactly.
Yes, better at shoveling snow out of driveways.
Yeah, if you were in this room right now, you'd be whining about how cold it is.
Oh, absolutely.
And here I am, just like drinking some wine. I'm fine.
See, you're chill, and I'm talking about a hat with a heat plume coming off my head. You know.
Yeah, and you're probably outside your door. There's like tumbleweeds or something there.
No, it's not that warm. It's not that warm. But yeah, certainly not as cold as what you're familiar with. But yeah, Turkey was Turkey's. Where were we in the?
I don't know. So let me just ask. Did you find it, say, very Islamic? And was there any sense of other religions going on inside it?
Well, there are two different variations there. There was Turkey when I first went in the 90s,
right?
And then there was Turkey during the second period that I was there,
right?
And then there's Turkey now. So when I went in the 90s, definitely, I mean, you can't get around the presence of Islam when you've got the call to prayer 5 times a day. Right. I mean, there's just no way around that. And even in the 90s, they had a very dense distribution of mosques relative to the population. Right. So 5 times a day, when you hear Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, you know, going in the rippling over the city. But when I first went, it was still very much a situation where the secular government on a Kemalist Ataturk model, defended by the military, was ensuring a secular standard. You know, they're a NATO member and enforced secularism. Right. How much do you know about the transition from the Ottoman Empire to the Republic? Because if you don't know about it, then what I'm saying may not have any context.
Well, I don't know that much. I know a little bit, but not so much. Why? What's the? Go on.
Let's continue our little history lesson. Remember that the Seljuk Turks show up, and then the Ottoman Turks show up. Right. Ottoman Turks eventually roll right over the Byzantines, because they're historically excellent fighters, excellent horsemen, archers, wrestlers, and half decent infantry. Although the best of their infantry are like janissaries, yenissaries.
Okay, so can I ask? Are these totally different, like tribal sort of racial groups, or is it just a difference in
which
the Byzantine Turks and the Ottoman Turks?
No, the Seljuk Turks are a different Turkic group than the Ottomans. Yeah. And they doubtless had some distinctions in their languages. Frankly, I don't know enough about the Seljuks to go into that, but they're an earlier Turkic wave coming out of Central Asia.
I see.
And they spoke Turkic language for sure. And then this later wave of Turks, much like, you know, in the earlier periods, you see Huns come rolling out and Goths come rolling out, and the Roman Empire has to deal with them. Well, just fast forward a little bit in time, and the remnants of the Roman Empire, the Byzantines, are dealing with groups that come out of Central Asia. And at this point, you know, rather than them being Huns, they're waves of Seljuks, and then later waves of Ottoman Turks. I mean, just before that, you had Bulgars coming out of Central Asia, you know, in the probably, I don't know, 7th, 8th century, somewhere in there.
So they're very similar, but they've been separated for long enough that they're quite at odds. It's sort of like more so than, say, Americans and British, or they're more like variations of Europeans even, are they? Sort of like.
Well, Turks, yeah. I mean, yeah.
It's probably hard to say. It's probably a difficult question.
Yeah, specifically Seljuks, I haven't looked into, like, you know, for example, I don't know anything about the genetic makeup and the state of the research on Seljuks. But take a look at Central Asia right now, and that'll kind of give you a snapshot of the areas that they came out of. obviously Byzantines are the inheritors of the Eastern Roman Empire, so that's Greeks and sort of European blood and old Anatolian blood, Christian, maybe remnants of Persian populations, or redheaded Celtoid groups, or Celtish.
Celtoid. Yeah, good. Yeah, good.
Something like that,
Yeah.
probably misused that term. But then what happens is, coming out of Central Asia, you've got Turkmenistan in Central Asia, and that's a group that way. You've got Uzbeks, who speak a Turkic language, as I recall. Tajiks, I think, speak a Persian language, but don't quote me on that.
Right.
So Kazakhs are another Turkish group, Kazakhstan.
Okay, so these are all groups that are in there today. And
right.
Is there sort of friction between them, or are they all sort of amalgamated into like an American kind of?
Well, no, they can fight, and they didn't have nation states in the same way that we understand them. So like when the Russians rolled into Central Asia to deal with Turks, and we'll come back to Turkey momentarily, they ran into city states. So there was like the Khan of Khiva and the Khan of Kokand, right? So you had a Khan of a particular city, and they controlled trade routes and that sort of thing, but it wasn't like nations. The closest they got to that was when an ass-kicking great man appeared, like a Tamerlane or a Genghis Khan, and they just sort of united all under heaven. And their model for controlling populations was managing flocks. So like you even see that later with the Ottomans. They call it raya, which is different non-Muslim groups within the empire that have to be managed just like, sheep or goats.
Right. Okay.
So these groups pour out of Central Asia into Anatolia. First wave of Seljuks, and the Muslim empire sort of absorbs them, and Muslim rulers of the time and kingdoms and states of the time sort of reach an accommodation with the Seljuks. Very often it's that Seljuks are in charge of things. In other cases, it's that Seljuks provide the military arm for them. Because basically when the Turks come in and meet the Arab world, almost universally, Arabs would argue with me, but I don't give a damn. Almost universally, the Turks kick ass and take names. They're just much better fighters. They're much more on a level with Europeans.
Okay.
And so they roll in and they push out the Byzantines and they take over, and you have this long Ottoman Empire. And that's the rule of this growing empire, which expands in stages, reaching a zenith in the 16th century under Kanuni Suleiman the lawgiver. They just expand and they take over more and more territory. And basically the same bloodline, although there are some gaps in it, but they continue to call it the same thing, the House of Osmanlı, which gives us Ottoman, Othman, Ottoman.
Right.
They run the thing all the way up until World War I.
And what's his name? The British guy. What's his name? The famous movie about him with.
Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah, that thing, that whole business.
Right.
So until that era, anyways. Yeah.
Exactly, that era. And that marked when the British began to hammer them, because what had happened previously, I mean, we can't get into all this, but the British had basically, as of the Crimean War, because of the expanding power and influence of Russia, the Brits and the French ally with what they called the sick man of Europe, the waning Ottoman Empire. And they prop it up in order to keep the Russian Navy bottled up in the Black Sea.
Right.
And they ally with the Ottomans, and the French and the English ally with the Ottomans, and some of the Danubian principalities too, to go after the Russians with the Crimean War.
Yes.
And that's why Russia just seized Crimea again, because it's a important key element of maintaining control of their part of the Black Sea.
Right.
But so leave that aside. The Europeans have propped up Turkey and allied with it for a time. But by the time World War I rolls around, the Turks ally with Germany, and the Brits are pissed off about that. Woodrow Wilson is trying to remake the world and redrawing maps everywhere he can. He can't keep his hands off a map. And so they decide that they're going to get rid of the Ottoman Empire, and that maybe they'll leave them a little rump state in some backwater area of Anatolia, but they're going to take all the best land for themselves. The French are going to take a huge part of it. They're going to give a whole bunch of the coastline to the Greeks. But the problem is that they don't, all the countries are tired of the warfare, and all the crap that's been going on and the dead men. So there isn't enough public interest in invading, in continuing the war into Turkey when it's ending in Europe. So what they settle upon as a solution instead is to arm a bunch of Greeks and to send the Greeks in to take over Ottoman territory.
Yeah.
And out of this whole thing, the best general, or arguably the best, or one of the best generals of World War I, was this guy named Mustafa Kemal Pasha, who later came to be known as Ataturk, or Father of the Turks. Yeah. And he was central to the very famous defense of Gallipoli, where the Australians came in.
I've seen pictures of him, and he looks brilliant with his. He'll have like yeah, and it's like he'll always be wearing like leather gloves and smoking or something. And
yes, and very stylish. Yes.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
very stylish.
I admired that right away, but I was like, well, that guy looks all right to me.
Yeah, and so basically what he did is he said not just no, but fuck no, and he rallied Turkish troops, and with scarcely any resources to speak of, having been hammered by war for so long, he managed to push the invading Greeks into the sea at Izmir. Now I won't go into that further because Greek viewers will get all pissed off at me. I will say, in my defense, I'm of Greek descent. I'm not.
Okay,
I'm not
this man is Greek.
Partially.
This man is Greek. We're not here to partially. No, we'll just say you're Greek, and I'm a Hellenist. I'm a Hellenist, for God's sake. I rave all day about Plato and Plotinus. I'm the biggest fan of Greece in the world. So.
Right. Well, you should definitely see Turkey.
We're just here to examine Turkey because we're interested in Turkey played a part in all this as well. All those ruins, all those Roman and Greek ruins from the Greek and Roman empires that are in Turkey.
Right, and they're in many respects, they're much better ruins in a better state of preservation in Anatolia of Greek civilization.
Why do you think that is?
There's so much more. I mean, to be honest, it's the idea that Greece was at the center of the Greek world is up for debate. You could say that many of the city-states along the coast of Anatolia were just as Greek.
And North Africa, and they were all over the place. Like, it was enormous. It was a huge thing,
Right. However, it was very old and had been there for quite some time in Anatolia. And then I don't know. There's just so much more. I mean, you can say, you can't sort of walk around in Greece without tripping over something ancient. But if that's the case, then it's doubly so in Anatolia.
Well, I forget where it is. There's an archaeological find that was recent enough. I mean, this is on top of everything else they find, not just Greek or Roman, but like crazy ancient. Yeah,
like Göbekli Tepe, the ancient temple site. Yeah.
Yeah, and other ones. I mean, it seems like they're always finding one. And there was one recently, I forget the name. This archaeological buddy of mine was telling me I should have it to hand, but I failed to write it down. But he was saying how amazing it was, that it was like unlike anything. It was old, much, as far as I knew, much older. It's almost Lovecraftian in its age, and nobody knows what the fuck it is or who they were.
That's probably Göbekli Tepe. It's like way ancient. It's like 9,000 BC or something. I mean, don't quote me on that.
No, they've known about that one he was telling me this is like very, very recent, some other new thing.
Like entirely new.
Well, in the last year or so.
Well, yeah, that's totally believable because I mean, I guess that's the point you're illustrating. Is just it's.
But I mean, there's all sorts. I could be getting confused, anyways. But there's all sorts. But it seems like that area of the world was like certainly a crossroads of ancient, and as we know already, these ancient civilizations. And if they, even more so than other places, that like if they dig a little bit, you'll find a temple to God knows what.
That is absolutely the case. Absolutely the case.
And to think that and know that's in the soil beneath them is something that like, and when you know that kind of, I don't know, how does that affect them? What do the Turks think of that?
I mean, there's some. You've got
Islam generally is.
Well, it depends. There's different types of Islam, so they're not like blowing up statues of the Buddha like the Taliban or anything. Some of them will just talk about. Some of them will be really heavy Muslims, and it's not like they want to destroy their cultural heritage or anything, but they'll just be like, "Oh yeah, that's an old thing. That's nice. It's part of our heritage." And they like you can't walk around without tripping over something that old. So just in general, most of them are not going to walk around gobsmacked by that because they grew up around it.
That must affect them though, to know that they're on that soil of that ancient stuff. That must, like, certainly if we were there, like if you and I were there, say, we would be like very interested, and it would affect us, and we would, probably.
But they're I think they're inured to it to some extent. I mean, I can give you an example. There's a girlfriend I had who had her family had a bar in this southern city in the Gulf of Antalya, and it's a very ancient site, very, very ancient. So they had a bar that's right next to this temple of Apollo, and as a kid they would come down. I mean, her dad's house and restaurant and bar complex, they had all sort of built it right there by the beach, right next to the temple of Apollo. So her thing would be that she'd sneak out and climb up on the roof of.
This was your girlfriend you're talking about. So you would go there and just do that, would you?
Well, she took me once, and that's why I know about it. She's like, "This is."
Did you make love to her in the Temple of Apollo? I mean, that would be just the ultimate.
No, not in that particular
missed
spot.
Opportunity. My God.
I am not. There's Roman concrete has shells in it and things, and I don't feel like tearing up my knees and ass. I'm not that much of a.
As a youth, a new god.
Well,
sorry, keep
going. Not at all. She took me through this thing, and we kind of like went through an area of the fence of her little business area, and you pop out on the other side next to these Roman ruins that are immediately adjacent to that Greek temple, and we just climbed up on the roof. And she's like, "Yeah, I used to come up here and drink." Or like in Istanbul, you'd be going down a street and you pass a funky fountain or whatever. I mean, there's just it's ancient, or there's you'll see Roman brick peeking out of something, and so anyway, the Turks come in, and they have the territory for quite some time, and then World War I happens, and they're trying to partition. The Western powers are trying to partition the country, and Ataturk appears and says not just no, but hell no. He defeats the Greeks. He establishes most of the boundaries of the republic that exist today.
Right.
And he comes in with all kinds of reforms. He abolishes the fez, which everybody used to wear at that point, which had been adopted, I believe, out of Egypt.
I have a fez somewhere here.
He abolishes the veil, if I remember correctly, so women aren't supposed to go covered. I believe he abolishes the call to. No, he doesn't abolish the call to prayer, but he insists that it be done in Turkish. And so that's an enormous break with Muslim tradition, like an unheard of break for them to be doing the call to prayer not in Arabic.
Yeah.
And he pushes nationalism really, really, really hard, and that alienates a bunch of the Muslims who sort of joined forces with him. To help push out the Greeks and everything else, and that creates this sort of split in the Turkish society between the Republicans, who are looking more towards the West. He gives women the right to vote. I mean, he just brings in a whole number of things, and he changes the alphabet from Arabic and introduces an alphabet basically centered on the Western model. So, you'll have a C with a little thing hanging off the bottom, and an S with a little thing hanging off the bottom, and an I without a dot, that sort of thing. But it's more or less Western characters. And so what he's trying to do is he made a bet. He had been to, Western war colleges and had been educated in Germany and visited Bulgaria and things. And, there was a portion, and he came from Thrace, as I recall. So he came from the European part of the Ottoman Empire, fair complexioned, much exposure to the West, and he decided that the direction that Turkey needed to go was towards the West, and so that entailed all kinds of problems. But he also recognized that the Ottoman Empire had been getting weaker and weaker because it didn't have any kind of nationalist basis. And he had seen that the things that had gone on recently in the past in Europe, because remember, all these empires had fallen apart. You had the Habsburgs who kind of splintered. The Russian Empire was splintering. And so what emerged, and what was clearly being accepted by the powers that be, with some exceptions, in the West, was the nation state model. And so what he was confronted with was taking a multi-ethnic, multi-language, multi-religious Ottoman Empire and creating the illusion of it being a nation state. And so Circassians who were there were no longer allowed to teach or speak their language in public.
Right.
Alevis, who were considered sort of heretical Shiite heterodox group, had to kind of be quiet. Kurds were not allowed to teach their own language or have like newspapers. It was all Turkish all the time. It had to be the new alphabet. And if you were going to do your call to prayer, it damn sure had to be in the Turkish language. He even, you know, brought people in who hypothesized about ancient sun languages. They called it Güneş dili, the ancient sun language of the Turks. And they
hypothesized. So he sort of created the modern Turkey, but at the same time, he's probably now, is he reviled there, or is he, what's
his contributions were so enormous. He literally and truly pulled the entire region. I mean, Turkey, the remnants of the Ottoman Empire were about to be flushed down the toilet. And he saved his entire country. So there are a lot of people who dislike him, particularly the more serious Muslims. However, he's still on the money. He's still, and most businesses will have a portrait of him hanging.
Let me ask then, because I don't even know what's the current regime, Erdogan or whatever. What's his view towards Ataturk?
I don't know what he really thinks in his heart of hearts, but he knows not to push it too far, because there's a lot of support for. I mean, classically, the people who support Ataturk the most are the ones who are the inheritors of his original party, which is the CHP. It's like the Turkish Republic Party or something. I'm probably Cumhuriyet. Halk Partisi, something like the Turkish Republic People's Party or something like that. Don't quote me.
Yeah. I won't, because I don't even know. I won't remember which color.
Right. But some Turks are probably watching though, and they'll be like, "Usalak Amerikalı ne diyor?"
Well, that's the other point. Let me squeeze in here quickly. What do they think of you? What was the attitude towards you? Was there any hostility or sort of?
No, first time there was absolutely none at all when I lived there the first time, because it was still sort of the secular thing. And well, there are a couple little details I have to throw in. Basically, remember I said that Ataturk said that you can only do the call to prayer in Turkish.
Yeah. And
Islam was kind of like, even the dervish schools were kind of put under state control and kind of muzzled. And the hardcore Muslim stuff was sort of kept under wraps or under pressure from the state. Muslims, and remember, Muslims are not nationalists for the most part. Islam is an international type thing, right? Because everybody has to pray towards Mecca. You know, if you're in Indonesia or in Turkey or in Egypt, you know, everybody's supposed to go internationally to Mecca on the Hajj. Everybody's supposed to pray in that direction, right? Your mosque has a qibla, which is pointed towards. I mean, it's an international universalist religion, right? So it can reach accommodations with nationalism, but they're not. Those things don't go together. So, and Islam had traditionally been the biggest thing that stood in the way of reforms in Turkey for centuries. So Ataturk was not screwing around with it. He was like, keep it under pressure. But what happened is, as I understand it, people who know more might take issue with it. That's fine. But my understanding is that in the 1970s, remember, Turkey's a NATO member, under pressure from the West, they actually reopened some of the religious schools. And so they started to be able to have madrasas, the religious teaching schools in Turkey. And as I recall, that was done to offset the threat of communism, which also, you know, they had issues there. Of course. Much like the Taliban or the Mujahideen in Afghanistan were employed by the West as a counterbalance to communism. However, that ended up leading to Islam sort of reemerging there as a force. And so, sorry about all of this. I had to give you the background because you asked me about Erdogan.
Well, I mean, it's got to be done, and this is why it's so mysterious, this place, and why it's hard to grasp, because it's so complex and so rich, I guess, in its.
Well, I dug it, certainly. Erdogan emerged, and again, people who know Turkey better than I do and have been there more recently and followed it more closely might differ. But as I understand it, when Erdogan's party, the AKP, it was actually sort of built on the bones of a previous party that White Sox, the Refa Partisi, which was a religious party that had tried to come up like 10, 20 years earlier, but had been sort of crushed by the state. They reorganized, stopped wearing white socks, and came up with a new version of their party, and came back. And I believe they had a coalition of the they call them far right nationalists, the MHP, the Grey Wolves I told you about.
Yeah.
Erdogan had a coalition with them. And
so Erdogan sounds like more of an anti-Ataturk sort of.
Not anti, because I mean, still Ataturk. It's a complicated thing. People can dislike Ataturk and they still get that he saved their country. So it's not
not anti-secular. More, he represents more the resurgence of Islam.
See, that's it's you can't jump to it. I'm sorry. In the case of Ataturk, it's very difficult because he had to balance a number of. He's foremost a populist, and he's very much plays a strongman role. Yeah. His first coalition out of the gate was that he was going to take down the traditional power structure, and the traditional power structure when he came out of the gate was Western, pro-NATO, pro-European integration, and very much.
Well, that sounds okay. That sounds not bad.
Right, but what he brought in was all the people like there's this neighborhood I lived in Istanbul called Kasımpaşa, which is where Erdogan, if I remember right, is from. And it's like, it's right in the center of the city, but it's just outside of the areas that had all the money and all the tourists, and wasn't getting funding, wasn't being taken care of. You got just regular working class Turks, and so he spoke for those people. He also spoke for the religious people who want to wear headscarves, right? And because of the thing of abolishing the veil and the full body, niqab and all of that kind of stuff, people who were practicing Muslims were pissed off because they couldn't wear a headscarf in a state school or in a government job. And so what Erdogan did is he said, well, the women can wear these headscarves again in government jobs, and we're going to have a place for Islam, but we're not going to let it go too far.
So let's say, would you say then he's the candidate who's sort of oppositional to American world domination, sort of, in a way? And that's not out of line with Ataturk or anything else, just like Turkish.
It's Turkish nationalism and populism, and he's had to play games with the people like Fethullah Gülen, the FETÖ. The Gülenists. There's a group of people that he pushed out of the country that he originally allied with, but then he decided that there was some kind of cult.
Out of the country.
All of them. Yeah. So he had Gülenists behind him at the beginning. And he had Muslims and populism and right-wing nationalists. That was sort of his core thing that he started with. And now he's lost the Gülenists and has rolled them up in sort of purges. He's purged the military to remove secular pro-Ataturk people and put the generals in jail. He's taken control of newspapers and everything else. But we'll see what happens with him. I fear that if I talk too much about the political stuff that I'm not expert about.
Well, we shouldn't anyway. So we should avoid it probably. But I just wanted to get an idea of what you were.
So that's the context for what's going on there, and it remains to be seen whether or not Erdogan is going to be able to reach to continue to strike a balance. He seems to be going more towards China now and Russia, which may well see Turkey ejected from NATO, and certainly there's no future for them in the EU, as some used to imagine.
I don't think. Oh, again, we won't talk about politics. I could say many things I should not say. But let me just ask you this: what's the largest, as far as you know, outside of Islam? What's the largest religious groups?
I mean, it's something crazy like 98.2% or something. Again, don't quote me, but it's an overwhelmingly Muslim. But remember that there are different schools. There's not just the Sunni Shia distinction, and of course, Turkey is majority Sunni. Alevis, not to be confused with Alawites, are a Shiite group, a heterodox Shiite group in Turkey that are very often discriminated against, and they very often have to keep kind of a low profile because the Sunnis don't like them. That's one group, but they're still a small minority. There's a very small number of Christians, very small. and even smaller now. And then there are a number of people who are just sort of non-religious, but the vast majority there are Sunni Muslim. And as I recall, they're of the Hanafi school of jurisprudence. So, you'll see like there'll be more sort of Turkish secular types, and they will, for example, fast during Ramadan. And they'll use expressions like astaghfirullah and alhamdulillah, but they're not going to prayer at the mosque every Friday, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of that, and so
it's an observance. And did you follow all these things and get used to them when you were there? Did you fall in line? You managed to?
Did I, like, for example, fast during Ramadan?
Well, did you? Yeah,
No,
I don't know.
No,
Would you?
no,
You
no,
didn't.
no,
Okay.
no. But I learned all about fasting breath, and you have to be careful. I mean, if you're not fasting during Ramadan, you damn sure ain't out on the streets eating a barbecue sandwich. When everyone else is like going through the day, they've gotten up before dawn to eat, and then they're waiting the entire day, and nothing's supposed to pass their lips. People don't understand that. They can't smoke either. Or drink.
It reminds me of a funny story. I just want to interject. When I was in Japan, I was there at the behest of a friend of mine from Canada, and we were teaching English to Japanese people. But he would routinely, because this guy was famous for fooling me all the time, and like making it his job to fool me about things. And he was the one who spoke Japanese. I was always at his command as to what was the cultural norm of things to do. To this day, I do not know some of the things we did. Such as he would say, because of all the businessmen drinking all the time, it's culturally normative here to just like piss in the streets because there's no bathrooms and you just whip it out and start pissing if you're on your way back from a night out.
In Japan?
Yes.
I just can't believe that. But yeah,
I can't believe it either. But I'm pretty sure he fooled me, and we did this a number of times on like nights out, and just.
And this was a Japanese guy.
No, he's Canadian, white guy.
Oh, okay.
But then it sounds very stupid because on my part, obviously, because he fooled me. It was famous for fooling me about fucking things. But I was completely in his power then and at his behest. But when you are seeing all these cultural shocking differences, you can get very used to an idea of like you can't do this, you can't do that. Like you sit there on a train in Japan and it's you can't blow your nose, but everyone's sitting there picking their nose. Stupid things like this, like little things. But it's quite, you get accustomed to the idea that everything is fundamentally different. Well, not fundamentally, but observantly different, let's say. So he fooled me to little stupid things like that, and I was doing these bizarre things. And I'm pretty sure, it was just him. But like that, what you're saying there reminds me of that, where you just don't know. The turnaround in what is culturally normative is shocking, like you wouldn't believe. Let's say I don't remember what my point was.
Well, little differences certainly. I mean, there were any number of those that I witnessed. Men tend to shave their bodies there now, not shave it down to the skin, but they trim their body hair short.
They shave all their body hair off except for their head hair. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but they don't shave it off. They just keep it cut short because it's an idea of being clean in Islam.
Okay.
And now, I mean, bear in mind, you'll have these people, these köylü, village people, and the joke is that they live on bread and onions, and none of them use deodorant. So they'll wash their hands and feet, when they pray at the jami, at the mosque, and they'll cut their body hair short, but they never use deodorant. So you just smell this sort of reeking laborer, when you get near them. So these standards are somewhat flexible.
This reeking laborer.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you people, they actually do eat onions. Like they'd get on their lunch break and they just bite into the onion, and they have some bread off to the side. Now, this is quite a bit of this is changed. I mean, some of this that I'm telling you about is from 30 years ago. Men keep their body hair cut short. Women wax everything in sight.
How did you become accustomed to this body hair thing? Unless they're doing it in the street, standing there naked, getting their hair cut short. I'm not suggesting you made love to a man or anything, but like
no, not that I know of. Not that I can remember. No, I remember Turkish friends. Oh, okay. So your friend gets out of the shower.
Examine their bodies in close detail.
No, it's more from what do you call it? Turkish women. you'd be at a swimming pool and you'd see, like I said, it's not that they shave all their body hair away. It's not that they're hairless. It's that they use a pair of trimmers and they have like a guard on it and they'll cut it to being a 1/4 inch long or whatever. Just so that you're not puffy, fluffy hair, because it's a Muslim thing associated with being clean.
Let me interject here with another European story for you, just for a moment, just to show you that these things are not universal, but the similarity. Irish friends of mine were in Germany, some continental country, and they wanted to go to a swimming pool. And they tried to go to the swimming pool, and they were told, you cannot swim this pool unless the men wear Speedos. And they're like, we don't have Speedos, and we don't want to wear Speedos.
Right.
They're like, well, then you're not you're not swimming here. Fuck off. So they eventually were told, they went and got Speedos, and they're like, okay, we will wear the Speedos. But like, silly shit like that. Yeah, exactly. You get a kind of like a law in place that is, how do you say, well, this is culture, I guess. Say you and I have this basis, as you said, in TV shows and battling each other as men and mocking each other, where these things just emerge and then you have a basis for something. So they have this idea about body hair that is bizarre and you can't explain it. Well, it's not bizarre, it's just the way to them it's normal. And I guess so I still want to know, like, finish what you're saying, but in what ways that you felt that you were incredibly bizarre to them, I'd like to know. Well, what about you was like outrageous?
I remember a tea lady named Shukran, which is, Shukran is actually an Arabic word. It means thank you. And so, as soon as you have a tea lady named, I can't even tell you what a tea lady is. Every office has a person who, they still have things like a doorman. They call him a kapıcı, the door guy, who is like a super in a northeastern building in the U.S. or something, right? The guy who's down there on the bottom floor and who kind of knows when somebody's screwing up or has to change light bulbs, right? A tea lady is someone who like does a little bit of cleaning here and there, and she comes around the office at like 3 or 4 times a day asking people if they want a tea, and she'll come out with the tea tray with the little tulip cups and like ask you if you want it dark or light and how many squares of sugar, or do you want a Turkish coffee, orta, şekerli, sade, do you want your Turkish coffee with medium sugar or lots of sugar or black? And so the tea lady named Shukran, and when you hear Shukran, since it's an Arabic word, it's more traditional, more Muslim. I remember I had shaved my head, which I was doing most of the time back then. All my entire life, I either, for the most part, I shave my head or I let it grow because I just don't want to screw with it. If I have to shave it, then I just you're done.
That's funny. I did the same. I used to do the same. Yeah.
I left it, you leave a little bit. I wasn't like, like a total buzz, but it's just I can't be bothered to pay for a haircut. It's like, what?
Yeah. I used to do the same. And in fact, I'm doing it right now, where you just like shave your head and then don't cut your hair for 2 years or something.
Right, exactly. Now I just let it grow and tie it back, But anyway, I remember her looking at me and going, "Your head, it's so round." So yeah, they have
this your story of difference. Your head.
Commonly, I've caught hell for this, asserting it. Maybe some people will disagree with me, but I've noticed that Turks tend to have more of a head that looks kind of flat in the back. It's more like, you lived in Japan. Have you seen that skulls have a different shape?
Well, everything there is different. I guess.
Right, but you generally,
if you're shorter, and they're like, there's all kinds of
right, and you look at the fact that they the upper body is generally longer in relation to the legs, which are shorter. Right? These kinds of things. Women generally don't have as much of an hourglass figure. The asses are generally a little more flat, and the hips aren't as wide. There's any number of physical differences. One of them that you'll see in East Asia is what I call sort of a flattened back head.
Okay.
And it's not all of them. You'll see round skulls as well.
The back of the head is flat.
And it's not literally flat. It's that it's not as dome or spherical as. This is a great conversation. It's going to be captured for posterity. It's going to get me in all kinds of trouble. So anyway, their skulls shapes are different enough that they looked at mine and they're all like, your head, it's so round. So that was a way I remember standing out. But the thing is that I don't look like a Northwest European. I have some Northwest European blood, When I was a kid, I was blonde, and then it went sort of reddish brown, never quite as red as your hair, but then it quickly went to mouse brown, and then to gray. So like I'm ethnically indeterminate, right? When I was in Turkey, a lot of people thought that I might be half Turkish, you know.
Oh, really? Okay, right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't stand out a great deal.
Okay.
The big difference that people saw with me in Turkey was that I wanted to be alone, and I would
Maybe
read,
why?
and I would read in public. Well, no,
Okay.
just sometimes I grew up like you have a book and you go sit on the sofa or whatever, and you want to read it and be left alone. At the time when I lived in Turkey, now it's probably changed with the internet and video games and stuff quite a bit, but at the
Yeah.
time I was there, it was very much like after the family eats together, they all go sit on the sofa. And remember, this is the mid 90s, but it felt like 60s US, right? So the whole family would sit on the sofa together and watch TV together. You When you're walking down the street, you'll see men with their arms around each other's shoulders, or they'll be in a line going down like Istiklal Caddesi, which is kind of like the main drag, this big promenade street. You know, people walk side by side, or they'll link arms. Grown men will link arms and be walking together. You'd be sitting down with a group of Turks, and you know you're all close friends, and they'll like lean forward and put their hand on your knee to like make a point and explain something to you. They're not gay. They're not gay. I mean, some of them are.
But even though I remember that more, even say when we were young. You're probably, I think, similar in age to me.
Right.
Even when we were young, you would be like, because everything wasn't. How do I put this without being political or anything? But you weren't worried or thinking about anyone being homosexual, let's say, and with your friends and that, you would be more kind of huggy like that. And it would
Right, you could be, or maybe that's just a Canadian thing because we were all.
well,
I'm sorry, I'm joking.
maybe.
When I was a kid, no, I mean you're not conscious about that stuff when you're a young kid. But in Turkey, it's a little bit different. It's literally that they're more touchy close. Like they also speak more close to you. Like there's a physical distance. They're not as close as Arabs. I remember when I was taking Arabic in high school, my Arabic teacher would always come forward talking to me. He wanted to get a speaking distance where he was right up on me. Like in their culture, it's almost like if you can't smell the guy's armpits and breath, you're not close enough. And so I unconsciously,
I do think that's related to a culture where it's like gayness is like, I'll probably cut this out. I'll just say it now and I'll cut it out later. But
go ahead.
I do. Well, I don't know. How can I say it? But you know what I mean? Where it's not so commonplace. It's just like, when men are,
well, no,
but you're not thinking about that. If it doesn't even enter your mind, you know what I mean? Like you're more kind of.
But the thing is, there's plenty of gayness going on in. Now, I can't speak for Arab culture.
Oh, really? Okay, right. I heard this is like that movie with that guy, Nowhere to Run or whatever. Is that what it's called? Or
no, you're thinking of
what's it called?
The one where he gets thrown in the prison. Midnight.
Yeah.
Midnight Express.
Right? That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. This no, what's going on is. Well, there are a couple different things. We don't have to go to over into the gay side of things yet.
No, we should. Yes, it'll all end up there eventually.
Right. First, there's gonna be drinking, then there's gonna be fighting, then there's gonna be fucking. It'll be a great party. And the guy's like, "Who's gonna be there?" And he's like, "You and me." Sorry. So with my Arabic teacher, they generally he'd want to be close to me to talk, and I unconsciously would want to reestablish the proper speaking distance, so I'd back up, but he'd come forward to reestablish his cultural speaking distance, at which point I would unconsciously back up, and by the time 1 minute of conversation had passed, I'd find myself with my back against the classroom wall and he'd be standing in front of me talking to me because I couldn't get away, and that entire process was unconscious. With Turks, you have a lot of that. They speak more loudly. They get more close to you when they're talking. They'll put a little bit, and they have more dimorphism in how they speak. So like in Japan, how the men are like hajimemashite or watashi wa oriwa desu, and you'd hear the women, they'd be like genki desu ka, there's a distinction in how the two of them speak. There's some of that going on with Turkish. So the men will be like, nereye gidiyorsunuz, right? And the women will be like, inanmıyorum ya. it's they have distinct ways that the men and women speak, probably less so now.
Yeah.
And
I
I don't want
believe we
to.
all had that. I believe we all had that once upon a time, and it's kind of like because I noticed that here and other places as well. But yeah, I'm sure we all had that. These are places that have retained their tradition where we have discarded it.
Maybe. Do you really think that the women in
I do
like,
believe so. Yeah, I remember that in Japan. I remember like when you bring it up that if you were a woman talking to a man, you had to speak in a certain way. If you were a young man talking to an older man, you had to speak in a certain way. So that if you were like a very young woman talking to a very old man, you would have a totally strange way of talking, or not strange, but unique way of talking. But since I've been here, I notice remnants of things like that are just like sort of these quaint artifacts now, because we're all living in basically America, or like, as an American vassal or something.
Yeah, the giant post-American strip mall.
I believe Europe had all these same sort of things.
But do you think the women very much see? My point is that they literally pronounce the words differently. I'm not talking about the difference between a man's voice being, for example, more low in tone.
Well, there was certain words you would use. I don't know about pronunciation of words. No, I wouldn't say that, but there was like an expected language of sorts. Anyways.
But like, look at the example I gave with Turkish, where like you could say "inanmıyorum," which means I don't believe, right? Like I can't believe it, No, yeah. Really? So a guy would say "inanmıyorum," a woman would say "inanmıyorum." So there's a different way that not all of them, and I'm exaggerating it, but it's the same thing. Like I said, if I say "ohayo gozaimasu" in Japanese, right? If I exaggerate a little, the men are like, Toshiro Mifune in an old samurai film, right? It'd be "ohayo gozaimasu," right? Bakayero. Right. Where the women.
Were you in Japan as well? May I ask? Did you?
No, I visited Japan once, and I used to when I lived in San Francisco. I was in a taiko group, so I got a little bit of.
I've heard you say that too. Yeah.
Japanese culture.
But yeah, it's totally insane. When you go there, it's absolutely insane. And let me tell you this, though. I went there with a absolutely 100% fabricated resume. My friend that was there, the same one who fooled me all the time, he was working there as an English teacher, and he was like, "If you want, just scan in my English degree and just put your name on it." And I did. I didn't even get to the point of having to use it. I just made a utterly false resume saying I was had an English degree and I was all this and that.
Was it to teach English as a second language?
I got a quite a high-paying job teaching English. And to this day, I have former students that I would talk to, and they don't even give a shit. I've even told them that I didn't.
Right, they want a native speaker. That's what they.
It was the job was basically just talking slowly and saying, "Hello, my name is Brendan. What are your hobbies?" Or slower than that, but it was basically speaking slowly was the job. As far as this is why I have this attitude towards credentialism in many respects, and this is why I find it funny that I would be so piratical and outrageous doing such a thing, and that I would speak about it and not feel ashamed at my lies, because it's like. I'm not even sure my employer would care, in hindsight, that I presented.
No, because they want the archetype, they want the model, the example that serves as the foundation for them to imitate the pronunciation. And Japanese are just outrageous with that. I remember I was working there with doing field research for a pharmaceutical company, and so we went and we had to go to these rooms where you have a moderator who's native Japanese who's interviewing native Japanese, and then we're on the other side of a glass with a translator who's live translating what's going on, and we're taking notes and asking questions. Man, that woman, she was just badass. Her English language skills were just really, really, really impressive, as well as her pronunciation, everything. And I was like, wow, you must have spent quite a bit of time living abroad? And she's like, oh no, I never left Japan. Like the Japanese are pretty hardcore, professional, serious.
It was the whole thing. The whole experience was utterly insane and utterly amazing, and I had nothing but profound respect for them ever since. To be honest.
I dug them. But when you go there, you're like, oh my God, these cities are ridiculously clean. Taxi drivers with white cloth gloves on, not to get their hands dirty, and no garbage and trash in the streets. At least not where
they just know how to have fun and be sort of, I don't know. They're always doing something wild and.
Yeah, but you went further than I did. That was, I visited, but I didn't go and stay and live there.
Well, Turkey is even more of a.
I don't know. I mean, Japan's pretty hardcore different. I mean, how much more different do you get from the West than Japan? I mean, maybe Turkey in some respects is more different, but
it was only because of this friend of mine that was there, that the fooler. You know what else he fooled me about once? He convinced me that the guitar player from the Eurythmics, what's his name? Fucking whatever his name is.
Dave something.
Yeah, that he had his he had his appendix removed for kicks because he had some disease that made him just not care about anything. Like as soon as that happened, right? Yeah, so these things, so he would make up these things that were so outrageous. You see what I mean? That would fool you because it would be like, how would anyone even think of that to fucking say it, let alone so maybe, and he would work at it really hard and he would fool me. So I'm pretty sure I was like in the streets of Osaka, like pissing in the streets in front of all these Japanese people, like blatantly and like rudely, and I feel bad about it, obviously.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's a standard Japanese culture.
No, I'm pretty sure he was fooling me about, but he was doing it too. So I don't know. Because there's this whole there's a culture there of the, let me just say this, there's a culture there of the salaryman, the Japanese businessman. But not only is he Mr. Business and he's on the the train with his briefcase and he's all got the suit, he's expected to drink, and they do a lot of drinking and heavy drinking. And it's true that there's not many bathrooms and there's like a lot of travel. So that's what convinced me, and I'm maybe it's true. Maybe he wasn't fooling me. Maybe it is true. Yeah, I'm not sure because you see a lot of drunk businessmen at night in Japan.
Did you ever see any of them pissing?
Yeah, I don't know. I may have.
All right. Well, you were drinking as well, right? So it's if you don't remember everything, that's yeah.
There's another funny story where me and him were crossing the road, and these very busy roads in Japan, and we got hit by a guy in a scooter, and the guy in the scooter wiped out, and like sparks flying off the scooter. And they have that sort of saving face culture where he didn't want to face it, so he jumped on it and drove off. But he blew my friend's pants. His trousers exploded off him, and but we were so desperate to continue drinking that he wrapped them around him like a skirt, and we went and drank.
What?
With his trousers exploded off his ass. It was like bare ass, basically.
I don't understand how trousers explode off someone's ass.
Well, we got hit by a scooter crossing the road. And there was sparks and this crazy scene, and I remember it was amazing.
His trousers.
And the guy got up and took off, and I looked at my friend. He's like, my trousers exploded and they're gone. And he tied them around his waist like a skirt. And we went
okay, so what you're saying is you're adding color by describing it as though they exploded, but they were abraded or torn.
He got hit and they blew off. Like his trousers were gone. Like they were split down. Like. Oh yeah, they tore. I guess they tore.
Remind me, if I ever meet you, remind me not to go drinking with you if I ever meet you. My trousers will explode. Yeah, okay.
Turkey. We're talking too much about Japan. We got all this Japan stuff. That's fine, but
that's good. I mean, I had some drinking stories in Turkey. What would you like to pick up on? I've been kind of meandering about. What do you?
Let's see here. So what
do you most want to know about?
Well, I know. Okay, so you described the history somewhat, but it's more or less as I expected, I guess. So it is the way it seems, I guess. Turkey. So, what have you seen Turkish Star Trek?
No, never. No, I can't even imagine. I don't.
Oh my God, you've got to look at it. You've got to see it. Or Turkish Star Wars. Have you seen that?
No.
Okay, well, I'll link you these things afterwards. But it's like. Especially the Star Trek, because it's very blatant ripoff. It's like they're wearing these 60s suits. They got the beehive haircuts and the miniskirts. It's from back in the day in the 60s.
Oh well, now I've seen some of their old films. Yeah.
Well, this is a TV show, so it's like I just got the impression that they were very blatantly ripping off Western shows, recreating them in Turkish.
Oh yeah. Like absolutely,
yeah, right.
There's quite a bit of that going on, but what you should see is the best of them is try to remember how to say this correctly. It's Dünya Kurtaran. Here, let me pull this up and I'll give it to you in the comments. Say that you can, or I'll put it in the public comments so that if anybody's watching, they can come along and find it. Let's see, Dünya Kurtaran Adam. There we go. Dünyayı bak ya Türkçe hatırlamıyorum. There it is. Yeah, it translates as the man who saved the world. It's from 1982.
Yeah.
Let me put it in here in the comments. And good gracious, why am I not able to comment? Oh, comments I can just so I'll put it in the private chat, and you can maybe.
Well, there's no live. This isn't live or anything. Or
right. Okay. Well, you can pull it and share it with the peoples. But that's a great old cult 80s film that's sort of half Star Trek-ish, sort of a little bit Star Wars-ish, but it's really, really kitsch and insane.
Okay.
But yeah, there are actually some impressive Turkish filmmakers now. They're absolutely amazing. Oh, that's the gay thing I should tell you about. Homosexuality is very much sort of frowned upon on the surface in Turkish culture.
Yeah.
But they have this thing with drag queens, where there are these much beloved, really talented drag queen singers. And they're recognized by everyone, and nobody cares that they're dressed as women. And they have their cultural place. But the homosexuality is frowned upon. But then there's this weird sort of underground aspect of it, because I lived in this neighborhood where there are a lot of transvestites. They call them travesti, which is,
travesty.
Yeah, but a travesty, we say, oh God, that's a travesty. It actually goes back etymologically to wearing different clothes, but
Does it?
Yes, it does. But there's some interesting, there's some ironic twists on using that term. Yeah. But anyway,
just like in Afghanistan with the Baki Bazi boys, or whatever it's called, where it's like there was a certain, as in India, I believe in the what's the big sex book in India again? The
Kama Sutra.
Kama Sutra. Yeah, I believe it's in there as well. Where as long as you're the one.
As long as you're the one penetrating, you're not gay. Yeah, they have that tradition. Definitely.
Yeah.
They have that. But it's so basically you've got sort of the top of the food chain, men dressed as women. Like a famous one is Zeki Müren. And what's another one? Let me see if I'm remembering this right. The longer there's another one of these sort of drag queen figures. I mentioned Zeki Müren. There's also Bülent Ersoy, so that people can take a look at those and see the cultural phenomenon. But then down at the bottom end of the food chain, you've got truckers who happen to be in a city for an evening after doing a delivery and dropping their trailer off or whatever, and they want to get busy. But in Turkish culture, you can't. There are female prostitutes, but it's much more common because of how rough it is, and most of the female prostitutes are foreigners. Because Turkish women aren't going to be doing that for the most part, or if they do it, it's going to be much more quietly. It's by arrangement. You won't be on the streets, right? And so what you have instead is transvestites who get picked up by the truckers, and it's just sort of a horrible underground scene. So that's some perspective on. I know about it because I have
a horrible underground scene.
My friend runs galleries in Turkey. His father's a very famous painter, and there's this one guy named Halil, who's a photographer, who sort of went undercover into the world of Turkish drag queens, and just all of it looks like Diane Arbus photos. It's all kind of horrifying. But anyway, then there are Turkish women. And I can recommend them highly as being interesting and quite wonderful companions in a number of respects.
Okay.
So yeah, I can recommend them highly.
And for what reason? Let's say.
Well, because they don't have a whole bunch of sexual prudishness that you might come across in the West. It's rather odd. They just don't have it. And at least when I was there, they had not been overrun by the Western idea that women are just men with tits.
Right.
And so you could actually still have there we go. You could still have
what?
Oh, sorry. I was adjusting my hat. you were still able to have a relationship where a man was sort of a man and a woman is sort of a woman, which was a very interesting and new thing for me at the time, because I had sort of unconsciously come out of the business in the West, where it's
in Europe and certain places you can still have that experience as well. And that, it's much North America is ruined in that sense.
Yeah, what they like to call gender roles, right?
Yeah, it's still there. And I mean, it's lessening. Since I came, it's been even more under attack. But it's nothing like it was back in Canada, or I'm sure America, where it's
just it's too much.
Yeah. But so I know what you mean.
So Turkish women are nice in that regard, and they, they'll make you yaprak sarma, stuffed grape leaves. Another thing, Turkish food, man. Turkish food is just, man, there's so much great Turkish food. Really excellent, delicious, wonderful. Yeah, lots. From sort of rustic country food to this sort of more cosmopolitan dishes that you get in the city. And just a whole range of things that they make with eggplant that's just absolutely fantastic. So Turkish food, Turkish women, Turkish beverages. They've got this drink called boza, which is I think it's made with millet or something. It's some sort of very lightly fermented grain that has a slight sourness to it. And it's served cold with cinnamons on top, and maybe, I think, dried chickpeas, whatever leblebi is. And it has about the consistency of applesauce. It's seasonal, like of a watery applesauce, but it's delicious. Boza. There's another drink that I think is common to the Arab world. It's called salep, which is made with a powdered root, which is served hot.
Okay.
Yeah, and they have it's rather sweet and cloying, but it's a very interesting taste. They have a type of they call it vishne sharab, which is a cherry wine.
All right.
It's good.
So it sounds to me like from what you've been describing to me, anyways, that Turkey is Turkey, and it is the way it appears to be, in that it's sort of unique. It's not East, it's not West. They don't look to one or the other. They look to themselves.
Right. And they have no damn camels. Everybody thinks they have camels. They don't. They're not Arabs. Genetically, they're not Arabs. Historically, they're not Arabs. Yeah. Most people.
I mean, some of them have blue eyes. Some of them are I've seen,
Well, I talk about it often. There's a particular type of vestigial Celt, because you remember we talked about Galatia, right? Paul's epistle to the Galatians. Galatia is the same roots as like Gaul. In terms of the etymology of the word, and they were in central Anatolia, and a lot of that blood is still around. I call it the Turkish redhead, because they're not really a redhead. It's not like a flaming Irish redhead, right? And from what I can see in the light, your hair has actually some real red in it. Theirs is more like halfway between your hair and your beard, where it's kind of like a reddish brown. Right. And instead of having blue eyes, they'll have gray eyes. Right. And they'll be just lightly freckled. So it's as though it's like
I've seen that. It's
like a desaturated redhead, right? And unique. And there's some of that left. And there's also like in the cities, there's quite a bit of European blood. Lots has come back to them from the Balkans, either from Muslims leaving former Yugoslavia once Muslims were no longer welcome there, or people who came later as refugees. Like they have a little part of area just outside of Istanbul called Yeni Bosna, which means New Bosnia. Refugees came and settled there. So there's a lot. And formerly, you had Venetian and Genoese colonies. So there's a lot mixed in, and
so they are as unique as they seem, and so they must look to all their borders all at once, and sort of they don't necessarily have any natural allies, and
they have tried to establish a feeling of being natural allies with Central Asians with mixed success. And you can see recently they had this stuff going on with Armenia and Azerbaijan with Nagorno-Karabakh. And Turkey has gotten involved with that, looking at the Azerbaijanis as cousins.
Right.
Azerbaijan, they basically speak Turkish. The only difference is instead of saying ban, they say man. It's like I can.
The only difference.
I once took well, I mean, probably more words that are different, but ban means I or me, right?
Yeah.
Like ben gidiyorum means I'm going. They would say man gidiyorum. I was in a taxi one time doing a group taxi ride, and a couple of the people were from Azerbaijan. And when I was current with my Turkish, I could understand them. So they basically speak Turkish. And of course, you've got a large amount of Turkish blood and Turkish ancestry in Iran, but they have sort of a mixed bag relationship with Iran. It depends on what period you're talking about or with what aspect, but they're pretty close to Azerbaijan. And I think they do well sort of historically with the Albanians. They're certainly Ataturk's trying to get in there now again. Arabs tend to dislike them because they remember that it wasn't all that long ago that the Turks came down and dominated them and, had their empire there.
Like in Lawrence of Arabia, the movie with
yes, but that remember
with what's his name, Obi-Wan Kenobi as the Arab. Guinness
as Prince Faisal, yeah. But remember that went as far as like there's all kinds of historical footprint of the Ottoman Empire as far away as Libya, which is why they're still getting involved in that now.
You know what your true talent lies in this business where you look at the etymology of words, and I think you have some awareness of that, and that seems to be your interest. And it is fascinating how you know naturally so much about it, and how your natural interest in language that you can just casually start dropping Japanese, where I lived in Japan for a month, really remember most of it.
Well, I only know a few expressions. So
so me too. But I do think you have a bit of a natural talent for that. Do you know what that's all about? And what's your? I've seen some of your videos. Some of your more interesting videos, your best videos, I thought, were on etymology and origins of words and what it means.
I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, that's your natural God-given talent, I think. Is
maybe. I mean, it's except I have a predisposition to look at things that way, certainly. But I had to load it. I had to front load it, like with the stuff, and some of it sticks that I remember. Others don't. But an etymological chain is fundamentally a mnemonic chain. Okay. So. Like I was just thinking about it earlier today because I saw I was looking at the underside of the lid on my washing machine as I put in laundry, and on the left side it talked about English. It had English, which said load clothing loosely or whatever it is, right? Put the detergent in first and load clothing loosely, and then you look over on the French side and it says charger or charge, some shit like that, right? Yeah. And so you have like charge and load, and to charge
guns or what is that?
No, to charge someone with a duty is to give it to them to bear. Right. Or to charge someone with a crime means that you've given them that to carry. They must bear it. So to bear, to charge, and to load all have this sort of etymological constellation. And so it's easy to remember the various words as I just laid out because they have a fundamental theme that then semantically gets applied in different ways.
So they all lead back to a hierarchy of giving someone a burden.
Right.
You are in charge and you've given them something to burden them.
Right. Or you could say a charge in heraldry is a sign, but it means the sign that the flag bears. Right. A banner charged with a rampant line.
A duty.
Right, but also I think carriage. Let me double check. I believe carriage comes from the same thing.
See, now this is fascinating. This is, this is off topic, but anyway.
Right, but from modern French charriage, from carrière to carry, from late Latin caricare, from Latin carus, a two-wheeled wagon, and car. So charge, to load, to bear, to carry.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Let me just ask you this while I have you here, because and God knows when I'll have you again. But so, what in this specialized interest of yours that is your God-given talent? What is the most interesting etymological thing you ever came across, or series of things?
Just an endless.
And not okay. Maybe that's too much to ask, but say going back to a root which says, "Oh God, how can I say this?"
one that carries the most freight, that was the most interesting to me, that I
let's say
explored
that.
the most.
Yeah.
A constellation that goes from, I put it in one of my little songs, one of my little jingles, Damga Dam, Doom, Deem, Tame, and Chain Domain. Word spells, and the slumbering herd compels. It's tame. And so you got like a German salmon, however the hell you pronounce it, to tame an animal, right?
Okay.
But then you've got, and these are all arguably related. And if they're not, if each of the elements aren't related linguistically, if a linguistician would come in and argue with me about it, I could still make a case for the underlying mnemonic aspects being so. Teach and token. Teach token, but it goes to token, and teach token token, which is like a token, which is an object, but to teach very often associated with holding up something that is a token for what must be remembered, right? Or to give someone a token to remember. But those go with
teach is
right. Oh, here, let me just pull it up. Teach. Teach goes back to Old English teken, to show, point out, declare, demonstrate, give instruction, train, assign, from Proto-Germanic taikejan.
Demonstrate a token. Yeah.
Right, but then it's related to Old English taken, and taken, sign or mark, see token. So you've got teach and token, taken, but it goes back to Germanic taikna, tekan, and Old Norse taken means zodiac sign or omen.
Right.
And then you go back and you find out
what sign, what omen, do you know?
Well, it means
or
generally
any
an omen in the sense of being a sign.
Any sign, sorry. Okay.
Right. And then there is there's Taken.
Tyche was the Greek goddess of luck
And fortune, right? Yeah. But Takna, as I said, for teach and token in that.
Is that where we get techna, like technology?
Tekne, no, I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
However, it does go over into Tagna, Tamga, Tamga, which is, and over into Greek Tagma, which means mark or sign or symbol. So teach, token, and mark, sign, or symbol in the form of Tagma. And Tagma goes to Tamga and appears in Turkish languages and Mongolian. It's crazy widespread. In some of my published work, I got into that. But
right.
You've basically got the idea of teaching, of showing, of a token, and of a mark or sign. And then one of those branches of it that appears in ancient Greek is tagma. And that can be a military sign, a row of bricks. And remember, bricks were often stamped. It can be tracks of an animal left on the ground. They could be symbols. It could also be military symbols. And then someone who is a tagmati, which you hear about in the Byzantine era, is a commander because he controls the banners and the signs of the military.
Yeah.
So you've got this sort of constellation of how people organize themselves and how they teach and remember and understand, all centered around tokens and signs and summarized under the word of teach.
That's fascinating. It is fascinating.
Yeah. That
would be like a sign or a token. The idea of that. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the ending of that. What's that movie? Oh, No Country for Old Men, where the guy's talking about how he remembers his ancestors riding out ahead of him and lighting a fire in the darkness, where you like leave a marker of something, where basically your ancestors have registered something they learned and left a
sign.
Left a sign of it, yeah, and you carry on from it.
That's the idea of reading the signs. And so for me, with etymology, I guess to come full circle, is that there are all these important vestigial things. Like I often use it as an example. People say nice. Nice, once upon a time, referred to something that was trivial and superficial. Like it survives only really in nicety, right? Like he observes the niceties, which means the superficial details of, Here, I'll look at my.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. No.
But so originally, Old French nice, I guess, careless, clumsy, weak, poor, needy, simple, stupid, silly, foolish, from
So
Latin.
they named the entire city of Nice after this
Now I don't know about
for
the
being
city.
on the south.
Yeah,
On
I
the
don't
south
know
coast.
if that's where it came from, but it comes
Okay.
from if that's where the name of the city comes from. I don't know, because maybe it's some other leftover thing. But from Latin, nescius, ignorant, unaware, literally not knowing, um, and
Oh,
so
okay, you're right.
so we got the idea of timid and faint-hearted, fussy, fastidious, then going to dainty, delicate, and then becoming precise and careful. But now they call it agreeable and delightful and kind and thoughtful. He's a nice person.
So it's like we inherit these things and we decide what to do with them. And
Right, but the thing is that they carry a certain amount of truth in them that people don't recognize. So when, for example, someone says he's a nice person, I just nod my head and say, yes, he is. Because for me, I still hold the old meaning, which means he's foolish, simple, stupid, just who cares? It's yes, he's nice. There's and most of the time when people are saying, oh, isn't that nice? They're talking about some superficial social gesture that might even be hypocritical. It's like in the South in the U.S. we talk about bless her heart. That seems like a nice thing to say, but it's actually kind of either stupid or evil. I mean, anyway, that's not coming across as well. I guess what I was trying to say is we may have forgotten what the word originally meant. However, in using it, if one knows the etymology of it, you might find that it is still, despite all the superficial things people think about it, it's still conveying its core feature. I mean, here's the best way to explain it, because it's harder with words. I could do it better if I had an example to hand in my mind, but I could definitely do it with a symbol. So just imagine instead of talking about the same phenomenon with a word, let's talk about it with a symbol. The symbol of medicine today in some places is the caduceus, but the caduceus is the symbol of fucking mercury. It's not the symbol of medicine.
Hey, my mic was not working for a while. Did you hear me for like a long time, or was it very recent?
No, I saw when the mute thing went on, and I didn't miss it.
So was it like a few seconds ago? It wasn't.
Yeah, it was 5 seconds ago.
Okay, no problem. I was not looking at the screen for long. So
no,
pardon me.
If I hadn't heard you while your mouth was moving, I would have let you know.
I wasn't sure. You might have been like, "Oh God, thank God he shut up. I can carry on now."
No, the caduceus is a symbol of medicine, so they say, but it's actually the symbol of Mercury, and it's the sign of commerce. And Mercury is the god of making money and of lying, of gamblers, liars, and thieves. And
well, I wouldn't. Okay, he's not entirely, but that's like an older version, an old worldview of mercantile things where lying. It's not that he's like an evil represent. Is that what you're?
He cannot be trusted.
Well, even then, I don't know.
No, possibly as Psychopompos as a guide to the dead, and that function can be trusted. Yeah. But remember, this is the kid who stole Apollo's cattle by wearing fake.
Well, that's true. Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
leave false tracks.
He's got a sly tongue.
And he's interested in making money, and he's mercenary. That's where mercenary comes from. Mercs, from the same root as mercantile or merchant.
See, I did not know that. See, that's a little gem you get out of you.
That all comes from Mercury.
I did not know that. Yeah.
And Mercury symbol, like that's the great seal of the city of New York, shows a figure holding a cornucopia and a caduceus because it's about a mercantile exchange, right? Right. And once upon a time, the caduceus was a symbol of trade. And
it went from trade to medicine because of
a misunderstanding. Because it's a misunderstanding. What happened was in the U.S. Army, they did not want to use the Swiss cross as a symbol of neutrality, which was being used by the Red Cross, right?
Right. Okay.
And so among the American military people, they did not want to be associated with a foreign nation because the Red
But
Cross,
there was always a snake associated with Hygeia, who was
with her bowl, yes, that's the daughter of Asclepius, and that same snake was wrapped around the single staff of Asclepius, and that's part of the later story. The two got confused.
Okay, so that's how they got confused.
But how did, and not, that's not how they got, what happened was this: in the US Army, when the whole thing of the Geneva Conventions was coming in, you had the idea of people who were giving succor and providing medical care bearing some symbol so that the other army wouldn't shoot at them. And they did not want to use the Red Cross because that's the symbol of Switzerland. That's why you still have that same cross on a Swiss Army knife, or, you know, the Red Cross itself came out of Geneva. Like Geneva Convention. So the U.S. said, well, to hell with that. We don't need any cross. How can we say that these people shouldn't be shot at? And we should say, well, it should be the same thing as being a herald, where you're bearing a white flag to carry messages, or you're coming with a message, so you shouldn't be shot. And in the old days, they would carry the Caduceus. They call it Kerukion, which is the herald's wand, which means don't shoot at me. I'm coming as a messenger. I should not be harmed. And so they used the Caduceus on their medical corps. And then people swiftly confused it with the sign of Asclepius. And then somehow the whole thing got rolled into being imagined to be a sign of medicine, when it's actually the sign of Mercury, the god of gamblers, liars, heralds, thieves, and merchants.
Well, he's not. Yeah.
He's the god of thieves. Okay, go read Ovid's Fasti.
No, I know he is. I know he is those things as well, but he has other functions, and he's kind of like.
There's also magic. That's why
he's not like a trickster. Like, he's not like he's all sinister. And
no, absolutely. And you've got Hermes as the guide of the dead, Psychopompos, and you've also got Hermes as the idea of magic and esoteric lore. So there is that as well. But what I'm trying to get across is that, remember, we were talking about nice and the idea of etymology, and how words we no longer remember what they mean, but if we did, we'd find out that they're still telling the truth. So what I'm trying to say, like about a nice person, I was joking saying, you know, they say it's a nice person, and I just nod my head and I go, yes, she is.
You believe they retain their truth all the way through their etymology?
Somehow, in some cases. So again, I couldn't explain it because I didn't have a good example to hand with the words, but look at the example of the Caduceus I just mentioned.
If that's even somewhat true, what would you say is not the reason, but what's your conclusion to that?
It's just everything's related, and
it's not nothing spiritual or.
Oh no, I would say there's probably some dimension, but I don't have to go there. I can instead just illustrate my point and let other people meditate upon it. The thing I was trying to convey with the Caduceus is, look at modern medicine and how grasping and greedy, and we talk about big pharma and how evil they are, and how they'll cover up the lies about their failed testing, and the fact that people get sick, and all they want is money, and they overcharge people, and they'll lie to you about everything, because ultimately the most important thing for them is wealth. And they don't care about people being healthy or anything of the sort. And then look at the damn sign on the side of the building, and it's a giant Caduceus, and they've forgotten what the symbol means. And yet, if you know how to read symbols, it's absolutely honest, and it's right there in front of you. That's the point I was trying to convey.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So it somehow is extant.
Somehow,
even through the layers of reversal.
Yes, somehow it remains there true. And mostly it's in situations where it's been forgotten. If it's been forgotten.
That's a great thing, is the forgetfulness of the masses, because they just don't.
But it means that they can, because they've forgotten it, they don't know its significance. They can't hide it and lie about it, because they don't even remember that it means something. It's like another one that gets me is when I was doing semiotics work commercially. We're way off of Turkey, but what the hell?
I'll make I can cut this into like two different. It's very long. I think it's how long we had it.
We're coming up on 2 hours now.
So we'll keep going. We'll finish this, and so then I can make two videos out of it.
Or leave it as one for people to have fun. That's up to you.
Whatever. We'll see.
The last point I'll make, and then I'll give it over to you to direct it, is an example with horsepower and cars, right? I
Right.
was studying marks and signs, and I discovered that the automobile emblems are usually contained in a ring, and they look much like a cattle brand. And you would normally be reading a cattle brand or mark on the ass end of a horse. Instead, what you have is automobiles that have names like Mustang, right? That harken back to horses. And there are other ones like, or to four-legged animals that run like Impala, right? And they have circular marks that are reminiscent of cattle brands on the ass end that identify them, like the Hyundai logo or the Honda logo or the Toyota logo or the Mercedes logo, all in rings, all that would be similar to like a cattle brand. And they actually got sinuous, muscular aspects of that look like animal bodies, not just what the headlights that look like predators' eyes, but the rump and the hindquarters of a horse that's muscular, kind of coiled at the back end of like a muscle car. And as I said, they give them these names, and they have a cattle brand kind of look at the ass end, and then they refer to its power as horsepower.
Yes.
They measure the energy of the engine in that way, and they call it my ride. And the thing that really just drove it home for me is that whereas you would sit there with a circular brush and curry comb your horse to make sure it had a beautiful coat and that its hide was in good condition and the animal stayed healthy, and you have a little circular brush with a strap that goes across the back of the hand and you curry comb your horse. Yeah. Well, instead, they're out there on their ride that's a 200 horsepower Mustang, and they're out there with a circular little wax applicator shining the surface of the car to apply wax on it. The entire system, all the elements remain there, and people are unconscious of it, and so they cannot see the continuity of the human practices. And that, I think, is just sort of a last way of illustrating how I like the etymology stuff.
Well, yes, that's interesting.
Well, I'm surprised that your brain isn't frozen, man. You're beginning to that thick cloud.
I'm fairly pissed, and I'm fucking frozen. And
you're definitely a Northern European because you're strong and bold enough to just stand in that cold without being hurt.
For 2 hours, the fire went out almost immediately. I didn't even get the fucking fire going. I was carrying on about it.
For me, I'd be dying. That doesn't last.
I've got a little art. Maybe you can see it there. A little Art Nouveau. There's a bunch of shite here, but in the corner there's a little Art Nouveau stove.
Yeah, I can just.
Black. You probably can't see shit.
Too dark. No, I can see the pipe coming up off of it for venting. But that's stylish. You live in rustic splendor. It appears.
Well, I built this little shack.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's all
hell yeah, man.
And look at the ceiling. You know what? Check this out. This is my proudest part of the whole thing is the ceiling. I've got some canvases hidden up there, but maybe you can see. It's unlined. You see that?
Right.
It's like sticks.
And what is the roofing material? Is it just shingle?
It's just like sticks and slate. I didn't line it. Everyone's like, "You're not going to line it. It's going to be fucked. It's going to, because it rains here all the time." I was like, "No." I was reading some things about traditional building, and I'm just going to, do that.
Man, you're way more macho than I am, man. Actually, laying the stones and the.
Let me just say, it's been there. This thing has been here for what? At least 7 years, and there's never been a leak, and there's never been any problem.
Hell yes, man! You get your Big Daddy Rabbit card for sure, man. Hell yes! And you laid the courses of stone.
Yeah, I did it all. Yeah.
Hell yes, and the lintel headers and everything. I mean,
that was the hardest part was getting those oak lintels up there. You see those fucking things?
That
one there. It's because there's actually two giant oak pieces side by side, both of them very heavy. That I basically just like shimmied. I leaned it. Hey, look at this thing. Hold on. Look at this. I got this not too long ago. This is a Swiss World War I backpack made of cowhide. Can you see that?
Yeah.
It's cool.
Man, nice. Are you so you've adopted?
Look at that fucking thing. Can you see that?
Yeah, hell yeah, man.
Cowhide. You see that? Nice
You're
and warm.
All rocking and rolling.
Cowhide.
Check it out. I'll say though that those shoulder straps look a little skinny. They might bite into your shoulders.
It's a bit small. It's for like riding a motorbike through like little villages.
And so, have you truly gone native completely? Have you cut peat?
No, but I burn peat all the time, and I wish I had some fucking peat for the fireplace. It would actually be going, then I wouldn't be so cold.
Right.
If I had some out here, but I only got like wood that I was chopping. So yeah, we should we should stop it there. That was good. That was very long, and I have lots of material from you.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if we. There's no way to conclude the whole Turkey business other than saying it's mysterious place, which, just as you said, and it's you could probably go on and on about the detail of it. And
Yeah, I would summarize just by saying that it really does straddle two worlds, and that the fate of the country currently is sort of in question, depending on sort of which way it will be led. What happens with its current leader, and how whether it chooses to go with countries further west, or, for example, to open relationships with China and Russia, because, being at the crossroads of the world, it could go either way. But it's certainly an old culture and an impressive one. I had a great time living there. I know my Greek relatives will be pissed at me if they ever watch this. But the Greeks and Turks have as much in common as they have differences, and I hope they can work them out because they're neighbors. And it's definitely a place worth going. I'd wait a little bit. So COVID problems and craziness with Erdogan and all the rest. But in future, if anybody has a chance to go, I definitely recommend it. There's beautiful ruins, all kinds of great places to visit. So yeah, I like living there. It's a complex and mixed subject.
Yeah, I would like to go, and I do intend to go. I definitely want to see the Roman ruins and certain things there.
Yeah. Well, if you do, you get in touch, and I'll give you a list of awesome things to see that I found off the beaten track.
Oh, well, thanks. For sure. I will. Yeah. And so thanks for doing that. And I guess that's it.
Yes, sir.
I'll talk to you later, and that's it.
Yeah, we'll go from there, brother. Thank you very much for having me on for the discussion, and I'll continue to follow your interesting content over there on Twitter.
Yeah, and same to you for sure. And I'll talk to you again soon. So,
all right, take care.
That's it. All right,
bye-bye.